that that's actually the in-between between these two drawings here. Okay? So now I have my two primary keys and my two secondary keys to give me my overall action. So now I can go through and just start to in-between from number 1 to 5. So 1 to 5. So now here's where we have to start thinking about that tricky stuff that's taking place on both sides. This is where the heel loops up. So my halfway in between 1 and 5, from a mechanical point of view, is number 3. Half the distance. So my heel on this side here is right here, which is this point, which goes through the paper to this point here, and I'm going back to this point here on this side. So there's the path of action of the foot. So I know that this is an absolute. That must be the heel on that one side there. It's got to go half. Oops, sorry, I drew it in the exact same position. Sorry. So I wanted half the distance between those two. It's got to be right there. That's my heel. Now, remember what I was talking about before? Once we have our foot in this position and we plant the foot down, we got to buckle the knee. Okay, so you can choose to buckle the knee on number 2, or you can choose to buckle the knee on number 3 as well. Just depends on how much of a cushion you want to put on it. I would prefer to put it on number 3 and have the knee bent. So that means that from number 1, my knee is actually going to come forward here slightly into that position, like that. So that's where the knee is going to go, right there. Now, I don't want to make it too long there. I'm just going to shrink it down just a bit. So it's not a pure halfway in between. If I was purely in between halfway, it would be from here to here. My knee would actually be back there, but then it wouldn't have any buckle. Right? There's got to be that cushion point. So because I'm buckling here, that means that my hips are going to drop down at this point beyond what I'm doing here. If I look at these two drawings here, okay, the hips are dropping down. The other hip is right there, but I'm not going to do a halfway in between. I actually have to go beyond that. So I'm just going to drop it down slightly lower there in this one. So again, this is not going to register as a proper in-between. See how it bounces? But that's what I want, because it's a cushion point. So it's like this is the farthest extreme position of the hips down in drawing number 3. So it's a brand new key for the hips. Right? This is the overlapping action that's taking place. So you've got to always be mindful of that type of stuff. So now on the back side here, this leg is going from this position where the heel is down. Now the heel is going to flip up, and remember on my path of action, I decided my heel was going to be there. So I know it's got to be in that position. So therefore, I can start to plot out, okay, my foot would probably be facing down in that direction there. If my hip is going down, that means my hip on this side also has to dip down. There's the low point of the hip there. So halfway in between those two would actually be up here. I don't want my hip going up. I want it going down. So I've got to place my other hip down here in this position. So see how it dips down and comes back up. So I connect those two together and put my spine in. And this is why drawing this dip position, this buckle, on number 3 works better than putting it on number 2. If you put it on number 2, it's going to be that one drawing where it pops. What we want is an in-between between this one and this one to cushion that in. And then we can come out of it, and it just makes more sense, as opposed to one drawing just boinking down and up. Right? So now my knee is going from this position here to this position here. It's swinging forward, so that's not a big deal. Okay, that's pretty simple to figure out what that's going to do. It's just going to swing. But because my hip is dipped, it's not going to go on an arc this way, because that would assume that the hip was up here. On the pendulum swing, remember, we had the static fulcrum point. Now we're moving our fulcrum point down. So you can't just halfway in between the knee there, because it shortens the thigh. So what we have to do is we have to dip the knee down like this in order to maintain the length of the leg. So therefore, it's going to come down to here. Okay. And then we can put the connection point in between these two. Okay, now if you look at this, you'll notice the length from here, the knee to the ankle, and knee to the ankle, this one appears to be getting shorter. So my original path of action was probably a little bit inaccurate. So all I have to do is just make the adjustment by making sure that the length of this leg here doesn't shrink and grow. So I'll just pop it out just a little bit further there. So that's better. Looks like it's keeping its length now. Okay, so always be looking at stuff like that. Is something shrinking and growing? So here, it's sort of that common theme that I've been sort of putting through your heads as we go along here. Who's in control of this thing here? You are. You control what this pencil does. I can't just put the pencil here on the pegs and say, okay, animate for me, go to it, have fun. Okay, I control it. I say where it goes. And the reason that I say where it goes and make that decision is because I'm flipping my drawings and saying, it's got to go from here to here, but this is dropping down. Why is that dropping down? It's because I buckled my knee. If I buckle my knee, everything drops. I'm thinking it through. Okay? So this is simply an extension of me actually going out there and actually walking around the hallways and feeling what my body is doing. I can sense just through the physical action of taking each step that when I do that, my hip drops down. Maybe not as dramatically as I'm doing it here, because this is going to start to be a little bit of a dippy walk, which is okay for my animation. Is it what I wanted to do? Yeah, I made the decision. That's what I want to do. Did I have to go that far? No. I could have pulled it up a little bit higher so it only went half the distance between, but then I have to pull my knee back here so it doesn't pop out as far. So I can make it more subtle. But who's in charge of that? Me. I'm in charge of it. Because I'm choosing and making decisions based on what I like and what I want to see. And that's what you have to do as well. You have to make those mental decisions and then figure out, why is it doing this? If something gets too short as an in-between, identify it and make the correction immediately. Okay, if I hadn't just glossed over it, because as you guys are sitting there, you know, some of you look kind of bleary-eyed, and I'm thinking to myself, I could do anything here, and they just accept it. You know, they wouldn't question what I did. You know, I'd have to make corrections to it before I did the pencil test, because then it would become obvious, but I could say anything. Nobody would know. Okay? But I've got to catch this stuff and point it out to you, because that's what you're going to do too. That's what I do on every piece of animation I ever do. You're constantly asking these questions. And that's why it's the thinking person that's going to have the best looking animation. You think the whole thing through. Every single last drawing has to have a purpose, has to have a meaning, has to have a reason for existing. And if it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, it's going to turn into bad animation. Right? So now, number 2. I got to do my halfway in between on these two. This one's pretty simple, okay, because it's just a straight halfway in between. So let's start off with what we know as an absolute. As an absolute, I know I've got to have my heel here and my heel here, half the distance between the two, and I want to slap my foot down. From this position here, I want to go slap hard down. I don't want to do a halfway position, because then it's going to make it look like he's walking on marshmallows. Okay, so you want to slap that foot down. Halfway between my knees, I'm going to drop my key there, and halfway between my hips goes there. Halfway between my other hip goes here. Halfway between my other knee is going to go there. Halfway between my heel, which was here and it's looping up and over there, is this point right here. And on this drawing, what I'll probably do is have my foot down and bend the toe like that. So now I just connect all my dots. Okay, from my heel to my knee, from my hip to my knee, hip to hip, hip to knee, knee to ankle. Ta-da! Okay. Put on my spine. So now I've got that action as he transfers his weight. So see how the hip is dipping down? So there's my cushion and my dip. So now I'm going from 3 to 5 with my halfway in between number 4. And again, this is just a straight halfway in between. So start off with what I know is an absolute. From my heel to my heel on the floor, it's got to be right there. Halfway between my knees This is where I'm starting to straighten my knee out, so I'm going to here, halfway between my hip down here, to my hip up here. It's going to go there. Halfway on my other hip, goes right there. Halfway on my knee as it swings forward. It's going to go there. Halfway on my ankle. Remember my path of action, my halfway in between that I chose was going to favor my number 3 position. My number 3 position actually shifted back to there. So by putting my in between there, it actually makes it even. So I do want to favor it, so I'm going to shove it back to that position there. I look at the angle of the foot and the angle of this foot, and I've got a halfway in between or favor towards this one. I'm also looking at the path of action on the toe too to maintain the length. So now once again I connect my dots, my shin bone, thigh bone, hips, thigh bone, shin, and draw my line for my spine. Now I've got my pulling back up action. So that's 3, 4, 5. And now I'm going to go from 5 into 9. So now I'm going to pretend to be a really poor animator. I ran out of paper. Somebody please donate me some paper. I can hear you all flipping like crazy. Is that like regular paper? Hey, not bad. Is it punched? Okay, great. I just need 4 sheets, I guess. Oh, thanks. Take them all. You're so kind. Okay, so we're now going to do number 5 to 9, and the halfway position on this one is number 7. So what do I know as an absolute? This heel is going back into this position here, so I find my 2 main points. There's the halfway position. I have to maintain that spacing. I can't favor one side or the other, otherwise it's going to create a little bit of a limp. Okay. So on number 7 here, remember I'm going to number 8 here, swinging the foot forward. So my foot's going from this position here through to this position here, and I had my in between is number 7, so I'm going to have my number 7 position is right about there. So that's where my foot's going to go. That's the other foot on the opposite side. Everything else is a halfway in between. So my knee swinging back in this direction. I go halfway right there. My hips. One hip is popping up here. The other hip is moving forward on this side here. There's my spine. So now my knee is coming from here, it's back in this position here to this forward position here. But don't forget what has to happen on number 8. I have to go beyond and then come back, right? So my number 8 position is going to be over here. Therefore my number 7, if I'm going from 5, I've got 6, 7, 8. I could split this up into thirds and make it work okay. All right? So if this is number 5 back here, there's my number 5 position, there's my number 8 position there, 6, 7, my 7 position goes right here. Got to think it through, right? You can't just arbitrarily throw it in. So you can see actually this knee is actually going beyond in the 1/3 position. So I've already started that overlapping action taking place there. Okay? So it looks weird here because it actually stops moving at that point, but we know it's going to go beyond and then it's going to come back to here. Right? Swing forward and then back. Okay? So let's do number 6 now. Number 6 is going to be a straight halfway in between for the whole thing. So again, go with the absolutes that you know. Heel on one side here to the heel on this side over here. Half the distance in between. Half the distance on the knees. half the distance on the hip. Got a little bit of expansion going on there. Half the distance on this hip. Connect the spine in and start to swing this leg forward. So on this one here, my other knee is swinging forward in this direction here. There's half my distance there. That was the 1/3 position. So I'm going to swing that knee forward there and going from the heel, which is here, swinging forward through here. Half the position on that goes to there, and just making sure that I don't dig my foot into the ground and keep that action going in that direction there. Okay, so that's my number 6. And now I just have to do 7 to 9. And this is the one where I pop the knee out too far. Everything else on it goes halfway. So again, back to the absolutes. Heel to heel. Knee to knee. Half the distance on the back side there. Half the distance on the hip. Got a little bit of a pop taking place there. That's okay. And a little bit of a downward movement on this hip on this side. Slightly back motion on the thigh there. And this is where I've got to come out to this position out here beyond. Okay, so I'm going to get a little bit of a pop right there. So my heel is coming forward here. I want to just bring that up just slightly. So I'm going from this position here. I'm going to go up. That's the heel coming back down again. I've got a little bit of a shrinkage taking place there, so I'm just going to change the length of the foot just slightly there. Or sorry, the length of the heel. Go into that position. Okay, so let's flip these now and see how they look. All in order. So for number 1. Okay, it'll make more sense once we put in the other in-betweens from number 9, 10, 11, and 12 to 13. This action here will make more sense. See the knee buckle there though? So we go from this position here, we buckle the knee forward and then it comes back. So it's going to look cool when that hits. And that hip dip is kind of cool too.